Okay, I got the red smoke.
Gun run, north to south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby. Give it to me. I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
Boom, you ready?
Yeah.
You gonna always talk that far away from it? Or are you gonna like be a fucking man and professional and speak into the microphone?
Didn't we already have this conversation?
You know what's cool about this? You're talking about the podcast right before we started. The first episode I ever recorded was in the Killcliff corporate office. You said you moved it. The last one I went to, it was, I think it was attached to like a brewery or a whiskey place or something like that.
Yeah, distillery on Armour, 199 Armour Drive.
With Ron Ortiz. Episode number 1. Filmed in the Killcliff corporate office at the time.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
You had already been fucked over by the people who took Killcliff over at that point. But
Yeah.
where would you like to begin, Todd?
You tell me.
Well, how was the fly fishing?
It was phenomenal. We had this. So I took my wife fly fishing for the first time, and we did a float down the Swan River.
That sounds correct. There is a Swan Lake, but the Swan River exists as well.
Yeah, I think comes out of there.
Yep.
And we had this incredible guide. It's called Bent Fly Fishing, and
What was your guide's name?
Libby.
So Montana. There's a city named Libby in Montana.
She was amazing. One of the best guides I've ever had. Unlike a guy I had down in Big Sky one time, which is pretty bad. Anyway, she was great. She put us on some fish. My wife, I probably caught 5 fish and never been fly fishing, so it wasn't the most challenging situation ever, but it was great. We had a blast.
Do you get to keep them?
No, we put them back.
Why?
They were pretty small. They were actually very small.
Small fish, though, look and taste spectacular on crackers.
I bet they do. I bet. Yeah, no, we didn't keep them. I didn't really know that was an option. Maybe next time.
I mean,
I like trout.
I'm not a fisherman. Let's preface what I'm about to say with that. What's the fucking point if you're going to catch them and throw them back?
It's fun to fight them. It's a challenge to do it.
Did you just say fight in reference to a small fish?
Yeah, tiny. I mean, they're like 6 to 14
so
inches
really
long.
just almost yanking you off the boat.
Yeah, just
fighting for your life.
So much huge challenge.
Yeah. Did you snap any poles? Did you have like welding gloves on?
No, I did not. One of them even took the drag. Not one.
All right, just checking to make sure our terminology is correct.
But it was fun. It's still fun. It's fun.
What else do you have planned for your Montana adventure?
Well, this morning we got up and went to Glacier National Park.
Yep.
And we kind of did the whole tour all the way up and back and made it back here in time.
Did you drive the Going to the Sun Road?
Yes.
How disgusting is the view on that? Like, it's just, you can barely look at it. It's so gross.
Yeah, I don't say this often, but it was spectacular.
Yeah.
I mean, it was sick. Saw some, I guess they're bighorn sheep. A bunch of them are like mountain goats, or I don't know.
I think there's both.
Yeah, they looked like sheep because they had longer legs than the goats do. I believe.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I couldn't either. But we saw some of them. They were pretty badass looking, actually.
Sweet.
And then, saw some bucks. That was cool too.
Yeah. Yeah, the animals up there are pretty indifferent to humans. I've done what was the hike we did? I think it was the Highline Trail.
I want to do that.
Yeah, well, let me give you the real beta on that because I was lied to. They're like, oh, it's a super flat. They might have said it was like 10 miles. I don't believe it was 10 miles. Mm-hmm. By my estimation, it was about 35. Of course, we knocked it out in one stretch in one day. But dude, the downhill section at the end of that, the way that we finished it, walking downhill was just punishing.
Yeah.
And that's what we ended with. But yeah, we, along on the trail, sheep, goats. I mean, there were deer, and they were just sitting there just like right next to the marmots, things squealing at you.
Yeah. I don't like them.
That trail would be awesome on a dirt bike. I'd be willing to do that. I don't think I'm ever going to walk the Highline Trail again. So what else?
I was kind of looking forward to doing that next time I was here.
Oh, you totally should. Yeah, have fun. I hope you don't get lost and eaten by a grizzly bear.
This coffee's great, by the way, this Black Rifle coffee.
What'd you go with, just espresso?
Yes.
That's the AK-47 blend. I need to put a disclaimer out. We are not actually trying to sell AKs, even though we routinely get a protester at the store who carries a sign. Have you seen her yet, Michael?
No, I have not.
If you are ever there, and I'm not, please approach her about potentially coming on as a guest.
I will.
All right.
I actually will do that.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, she is convinced that we are, in fact, promoting violence, specifically school shooters, because the name of the coffee is AK-47.
Yeah. That makes sense.
People are free to believe what they want in this wonderful world that we live in. She has very intricate signs that she brings.
So it's a protester?
Yeah.
She's protesting?
Yes.
Inside or outside?
Oh, she's not allowed inside.
Oh, okay.
Let me be very clear. I've checked the
Yeah.
ordinance on this. She can go on the sidewalk. She
Okay.
cannot directly interfere with commerce in any way.
Yeah.
She can talk to people if they approach her, but she can stay the fuck off our property.
I cannot wait to meet her.
I think that episode could be a banger. I'm going to go out on a limb and say we would agree on very few things. But I think we could have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, she sounds awesome.
I think in conversations like that, if you ask questions and just allow people to speak, it illuminates what you may agree with and what you may think is batshit crazy pretty quick. Like, there's actually I realized this in the second interaction I had with her. There was no point in trying to change her mind in any way, so I've always phrased the conversations now in the terms of trying to understand why she feels the way that she does, because who am I to say, like, why people should believe whatever. Like, there's a flat earth society. I have my suspicions why people believe that. It's mostly because they're dorks and idiots. But that's just me.
Yeah, I'm running with you.
Would you go to a flat earth convention with me?
Absolutely. I would love to.
Would you
Actually,
present? Because that's what I would want to do, is present.
Yeah, I would host a panel.
Yeah.
And
Michael, you would need to create all the material. Our presentation would be on how the world is round, but we would give this at a flat earth society. Of course,
I'll do it.
this would be undercover. We wouldn't tell them exactly what we're going to present with, and then we're going to drop knowledge on them.
Make it very subtle.
Very subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we could say it's a disc.
But a round disc.
Yeah, multiple layers of a disc going smaller as you go up.
That's right. They're discs stacked on top of discs. They are flat, but in totality, it's a sphere.
We could argue about whether they're longitudinal or latitudinal discs.
Yeah. What do you think has to happen in somebody's life to think the world's flat?
It's a mental health issue.
I go between that and that even though we live in a world that is more connected than we have ever been, people are more alone than they've ever been. And I think they want to just be a part of a group that accepts them.
That you put a lot of thought into that.
I've watched every documentary I can find on flat earthers. But people who join cults. Let's talk about Scientology, because it's one of my favorites. Michael was so pumped when we had Aaron Smith come in here, the guy who escaped Scientology after like 30 years. I struggle to believe that they believe everything. I think they're smart enough to not believe everything, so then why do they stay? I think they stay because it's like they're people, you know?
Well, I think they're afraid to leave, right?
Well, afraid to leave because you'll lose your tribe, whatever your
Right.
tribe may be. I could see that for being a compelling reason, even if it's like there's got to be some people at the Flat Earth Convention like, man.
But Scientology has those awesome uniforms.
They do.
They're Navy uniforms. So I'm kind of partial to it.
How trash were the naval uniforms that we used to wear?
I mean,
Because you were enlisted, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
fucking dress whites with the flap and the 13 buttons. What people may not know is dress whites and blues, actually. 13 buttons. Yeah, it's hard to describe how much a struggle that is when you are shit-faced trying to take a piss.
yeah. Yeah, it's impossible to get out of
There's
them.
the outer flap, then the inner flaps.
Yeah. Well, and then guys like Velcro them. Like they go get Velcro. and
Such a
put in-
varsity move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I need to get on that level. I never did that.
What year did you join?
93,
When did you get out?
97.
Why so short?
Oh, man, that's a long story.
We'll make it short.
Yeah. Yeah, I got out. So I got out the end of my enlistment. I had a 4-year enlistment. And that's why I got out. I should have stayed in. People are like, oh, no regrets, man. I regret getting out.
I believe it's no regrets.
Oh, yeah, no, but that's why.
Why do you regret getting out?
It's like anything. Like I made a decision, which I think was the right decision for me. At the same time, I loved it. So I loved the team guy part of being a team guy.
Yeah.
And I still think it's the coolest thing I've ever done to date. But and I love that community. But at the end of the day, I didn't think it was the place I was going to last the longest, or I was going to. When I got in, I thought I'd be in forever, right? And then I got in,
It's
to
a
the
pretty
team.
rapid change of opinion in 4 years.
The Navy will do that to you.
Yeah, I mean, the teams are pretty isolated from traditional fleet Navy.
True.
And then so probably about a year of your time was spent in the pipeline, right?
Yep.
Getting to your – what teams you go to?
Well, 8.
Okay, so East Coaster.
Yep.
Did you have a shitty first platoon? Like, what happened?
No, I mean, I didn't like. I basically everybody around me was pretty great all the way around. You know, from my OIC is I think a legend. You know, great guys in that platoon, great chief, great everybody. But my enlistment was up, and I needed to extend, and I just made a decision that if I wasn't really going to go any further than I was in the Navy. And keep in mind, so in the mid-90s, like not much was going on.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of pressure being put on. What year did you get in? 2000?
No, I went through Buds in 97.
Okay, so the year I
Yeah, I
got,
checked into Team 5 in 97.
So yeah, so basically, there was a lot of pressure being put on new guys. It was like I felt like they were crowding guys out. Does that make sense at that point in time? Like
Crowding guys out.
so like I saw 2 guys at my team get kicked out in rapid succession. One officer, one enlisted guy, and the officer I didn't really necessarily think, and I wasn't in a position to judge.
Yeah.
And the enlisted guy though I thought was a stud, and he was getting thrown out for saying that there was an unsafe officer, not the same officer, saying this one officer was unsafe in his opinion, and he got kicked out for that. And
He got removed from the teams for voicing his concern about an officer he considered unsafe.
who looked down the barrel of I think it was a M60.
Well, how else are you supposed to know if it's clear and safe?
That's how I was taught.
You do a flashlight down the chamber, and then you clearly look through the barrel.
Right.
Who the fuck does that?
Yeah.
I mean, he was unsafe to himself. Wow, so he spoke up, and they ejected him from the teams.
Yeah. It was sad. I really thought the guy was an amazing guy too.
Wow.
So that was right when I got there, and he had been in Somalia and done some cool stuff, and you know, ultimately, like I had kind of started off on the wrong foot with our training officer, and so that kind of put me into, there's like a bell curve when you get to the teams. You know, you got like the average new guy, the totally outstanding new guys, and then the new guys, they're just like, who the hell is this guy? So I immediately went into that category and started kind of getting, you know, last pick on everything, you might say. And once that started happening, I was like, okay, this isn't like my future. For instance, our platoon got 4 billets to sniper school, and that's the only thing I wanted to do, and I didn't get to go. So I was pretty disappointed about it.
Yeah.
And not like, and only 1 or 2 guys made it. I think 1, might have been 2.
Through the course?
Yeah, and the guy who made it is one of my best friends, who was also a new guy.
Yeah.
And it was a couple older guys that didn't make it. No big deal. It's a really tough course, right? But at the end of the day, I was just like, okay, they're telling me like I'm not gonna be here forever. So, and what I should have done is I should have just been a grown ass man and been like, hey, dude, clean your shit up and do things right. Instead, I was like, I don't feel comfortable, you know, longer term.
How old were you?
I was early 20s, so 24,
Okay.
25, 24. I think it was 24. I'm a different person. I'm 50 now, right? I'm a different person today.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Dude, you're going to die so soon.
How old are you?
45.
Oh.
I'll die 5 years after you.
Yeah. So much sooner.
Almost
than
46. Yeah, to me, the math, like my birth certificate math doesn't make any sense. I do not feel like somebody who's almost 46 years old. And I feel different than I did when I was 40. I feel fucking different than I did when I was 30, and I struggle to recognize the person that I was when I was 24.
Yep.
It was maybe I stuck it out because I didn't think about the after until much later on down the road in my career, which has pros and cons, right? Very task saturated, very oriented towards what I wanted to do. Maybe not the best prepared for when the end came around. Actually getting hurt overseas really did help me with that, though, because I was like, oh, shit, this might be over now. So I started thinking about the next years before I actually got out. But, yeah, I don't recognize the person I was. God, I did some catastrophically dumb things.
I bet I'm all in on that comment. I guarantee I was. We know that some of the same people, they would probably verify that I was ragingly stupid. So
I think, Michael, how old are you?
I'm 23.
Yeah. I think men get to like 25 and beyond largely through luck.
Yeah.
We are trying aggressively to do dumb shit.
Yep.
Except for Michael. He's like 40, but stuck in a however old he just said was body, 23. Yeah.
Correct.
He's like an old soul. He goes home and reads like poetry and plays chess and shit.
That's impressive.
Yeah. I was probably still painting with my own shit at 23. You know, like, I know what I'll do. I'll drink this bottle of Jägermeister and do a self-portrait in my own fecal matter. Hypothetically, everybody. I'm not saying I actually did that, but I probably would have. Why, did you feel regret when you first got out? Or was that later?
No, I mean, when I first got out, it was like every year I take away from the future of what I'm going to do next. I'm taking away from my family and everything else. And pretty early after getting out, I realized I had a little bit of a responsibility to my friends I left behind.
Where'd you leave them behind from? You talking about the team guys?
Team guys,
Okay.
yeah. Like I could start, making new contacts and connections and hook them up, because a couple of them had hooked me up with their guys that were civilians for job interviews and things like that. So I wanted to be, accretive to their journey when they got out, and that kind of snowballed, in a big way after 9/11. Right, I was like, okay, now I really got to take things to another level. So I regret that I got out, but it was the right decision for me. I just wish I could have done it 2 years, 3 years later.
Do you think you would have felt the same sense of regret you do if 9/11 had never happened? Or do you feel like you missed out on something?
So the day I checked in to the team, there was a guy that had a locker next to mine, a cage next to mine. And he said something very negative about the teams, like right then. Like, I'm like, I just got here, dude. And he kind of denigrated like the mission of a regular SEAL team as compared to Dam Neck or other,
Dam Neck had completed, I think, approximately and exactly 0 real-world missions at that point.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, cool story.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm just assuming what he was saying, but
did he come from that command?
No, he didn't. But
dude, they weren't doing shit. They were training hard.
Yeah.
But they were not really combat tested. I think they might have been doing some like PIFWIC stuff, which stands for Personnel Indicted for War Crimes, over in like Bosnia.
Right.
Like they're doing some recce and I think occasionally doing some like shoving people into a van.
Right.
But like when I got to the squadron over there, that's the plaques and stuff that was still on the wall.
Right.
So let's not pretend like they were Jason Bourning their ass all over the world.
Yeah.
Now, is it a different mission than a conventional SEAL team? Sure. But nobody was doing shit in 97.
Yeah. Well, mid-90s, right?
Yeah.
So
or when you got in, what was 94?
Somalia to Serbia basically was my time range, right? So, yeah. So, sorry. Basically, I kind of like, that set a weird tone, and then I was kind of like looking at things. I was like, wow, we train a lot. It's a really tough environment to raise a family in. It's full dedication, all the time. And, you're poor, for lack of a better term. You're not getting rich as a team guy or anything. Not that that's the point, but I mean, like,
most people don't join the military for the monetary aspect.
Of course
if you have
not.
An internet connection, you can figure out how much you will make for probably your entire career.
Yeah. Except, it's kind of like the college athletes who are like spending their whole time, working as a college athlete, not getting paid for it, but they're basically employees of the school, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where there's like this imbalance of efforts. You get ranked the same as, some regular guy in the fleet. You're under the same architecture, but it's kind of, it was, I don't know. It just wasn't a good fit for me. I mean, I'm just being honest, dude. It was not a good fit. But I love the team guy work. I love, everything from, the platoon, training, and everything else was incredible.
But if you accomplish that, so it seems like you had it as a goal, you were able to get there.
Yep.
And I mean, if it's not everything is great for everybody. If you were able to identify that perhaps it wasn't the best fit for you, but you were still able to prove to yourself that you were capable of doing it, what's left to regret?
I think I could have done more and done it better, and I think I could have grown up a little bit more in that community and left on a better note.
Would you trade that for where you are now?
It depends on where I would be now had I not done that. But I think
these are my hypotheticals, sir. You don't get to interject them into the questions.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's one of those things where you have to kind of like, I wouldn't, so I wouldn't trade it now simply because one of the goals, like my fear was like, raising a family, right? And how was I going to do that? My dad was an Army colonel. My stepdad was an Army colonel. And, he raised, 4 kids, and we weren't like, it was tough, like it wasn't like that's not the easiest life either, right? And I was like, okay, you take that, divide it by 75, or take 75% away, and that's where I am, and I'm not going anywhere fast. How am I going to raise a family? And that would seem to be, at the end of the day, my prime directive was to raise a family of my own someday. I'd come from, my dad died when I was a baby, and I was lucky that my mom met this colonel, and he raised me for a while. So that had a huge impact on me, but I knew that I wanted to get there someday. So that was kind of a prime motivator for me.
Okay.
And I didn't think the route I was going down in the teams was going to take me there. Girls weren't like, oh, cool, you're never here. I wasn't having any success on the girl front either.
Did you try dudes?
It
was a little early for that time, but I mean, you could have been on the front leading edge.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I was around dudes enough already, but so I was trying to get away from dudes.
It's fair enough. Yeah, it's a tough lifestyle for sure. I mean, there's a reason that the military divorce rate is what it is.
Yeah.
In and of itself, and then you start layering into the special operations community. It's not trending in the other direction.
Yeah.
It actually exponentially gets worse.
Yeah, I mean, there was a guy who was a really good guy who was a single dad, had like a 5 or 6 year old son. He was the guy I mentioned earlier, my best buddy's roommate with his son, and he died in a helicopter crash during a training incident. And this is all happening in real time in a SEAL team. And I'm just like, dang, like that little boy, is going to have a challenging road ahead of him. I didn't know if that was the route I wanted to take after, my dad passing away at an early age.
I ask about the regret because I think it's one of the most powerful emotions that humans have.
Yeah.
And it haunts a lot of people. I don't know if everybody can put it down or figure out a way to put it down, but it'd be awesome if you could figure out a way to not think about that time in your life with any level of regret. Because at the end of the day, let me frame it a little bit differently. I regret having to make that decision, but I made the right decision. So I wish I hadn't needed to make the decision. Yeah.
But I know that I made the right decision, and that's the tough thing. Is sometimes life you got to make a decision you don't want to make. It's not the decision you want to make, but it's the right decision. So,
not all decisions are between optimal and suboptimal. Some decisions are, hey, I have shit and I have shit.
Right.
And that's a tough concept for people to wrap their head around. They want to always frame conversations of, well, take the better option. All 5 of these options suck a big old dong.
Yeah.
It's like, which dong do you want? Michael's answer, of course, is all of them. But I want him to be who he is, and I want him to grow into the man he wants to be.
Yeah.
Or woman.
I apologize for assuming that you didn't want to take that path.
It's fine.
This is the world we live in.
It's a good world.
Yeah. So what'd you do when you got out?
I kind of well, the first thing I did was I got
Please say Chippendale.
no. But I ended up one of the job interviews I got was at J.P. Morgan, and it was at the trading floor at 60 Wall Street.
Did you have any trading experience?
Zero. Yeah,
Perfect.
that was
Sounds
pretty,
like you were ultimately prepared.
Yeah, I didn't have. I mean, I had zero experience, and I had a desire to do it.
But how the fuck did you get a trading job?
I didn't. No.
Okay.
I got an interview.
Okay. Phew.
And
Say, goddamn, I know where the housing collapse came from.
There's two sides of the trading floor, and the guy who ran one side was like, "Yeah, all day long, dude, but you got to get by that guy over there." And I went over to this guy, and this guy was basically like, "Fuck you," like not ever. And the guy on the other side was like, "Listen, I can get you down on the New York Stock Exchange." I was like, cool, whatever. He's like, but what you could also do is go get your licenses up in, where you live in Greenwich, Connecticut or whatever. So I did that. I got these licenses, and I was sitting there.
Like a Series 7 license?
Yeah, Series 7 and 63.
Yeah.
It was like Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter. It was like cold calling people for money. It was really tough. Like incredibly difficult, but I was doing okay at it. Just out of sheer determination, of just doing all right. And not the best. And then one day a team guy called me. I was like, how would you like to make $500 a day? And I was like, what does it involve? And he was like, well, you got to go with me over to the Middle East. And I was like, okay, cool. So I went over there for a few months and had some interesting times.
What were you doing?
We were training the UAE's special operations guys on how to do underwater searches.
Okay. What were they searching for?
Bombs.
Did they find any?
Nope. They could barely find the regulators.
That checks out.
Right.
Well, I hope they paid you in cash or doubloons or whatever.
Dirhams are really valuable.
Okay.
They really, back then it was like 3 dirhams to $1 or something like that.
Okay. Well, I hope they paid you hundreds of thousands of dirhams.
I didn't make very much, but it was a great time. I met a great friend who's from your former command over there, and ended up meeting some really cool people and some cool stories and stuff like that came out of it.
What'd you do after that?
I ended up going to, so that now I was kind of intrigued with like the security world and all this stuff. And I got a job at a company called Kroll Associates. And Kroll Associates was a kind of a white collar investigative firm where big Wall Street law firms would hire these guys to do investigations and things like that. And they also did some security background checks and things like that. And they had a lot of like really incredible people there, like former U.S. attorneys, where basically that was like the staff was like these U.S. attorneys, some analysts from government agencies and folks like that. And so they hired this Marine, and he hired me to stand up their kind of the protection side of their business. And then the first job I went on, just after a few months of being there, the CEO of this not Fortune 500, but multi-billion-dollar company hired me directly to work for him. And so I went to work for this very wealthy, very influential entrepreneur, and that's kind of was the break I got in life, you might say.
What did he want you to do?
So he walked in the office one day, my office. I was sitting in the office, like my contract was over for like 3 months. I guess I didn't realize at the time I was waiting out the non-solicit clause of the agreement that he had signed with this company. And he walks in and said, hey, I want to offer you this job, and here are your 4 responsibilities. It was like physical security, IT security, and a couple other things. And I was like, okay, cool. I don't know how to do 75% of that. And he was like, I'm hiring you because you will figure it out. And I was like, I will. Yes, I will. I'm going to figure it out. So I took the job, and it was great. And he was a mentor to me for 7 years. I worked at that company and at his family office for 7 years. Is probably one of the best professional experiences I ever could have had, ever could have never knew how far that was going to go and how valuable that relationship was going to be.
What'd you do after you left his office?
In his family office, we were looking at buying companies for him to run. And every once in a while, a company would come up and I'd be like, hey, could I go run this for you? And he would be like, no, I need you to do your job working for me so I can do my job. No, it's totally fair. And then one day the phone rang and this guy was like, I'd like to interview you for a CEO position. And I was like, is this a prank caller? And he was like, no, seriously, my friend recommended you, and I've got this kind of shitty situation down in Atlanta. Why don't you come take it over and fix it? And so I went down to meet him. It was a legit opportunity. I would have done a lot of things differently now, but it was a startup software company that had face planted, and I needed to come in, hit the reset button, and start the company. Got it going, and that was how that transpired. My old boss wasn't very happy with me, rightfully so, but it was a chance for me to get out and kind of spread my wings a little bit and see if I could make good decisions.
Did you repair that relationship?
Yeah, he did come to my wedding several years later, and we stayed in touch for a while. People always ask me why I don't ask him for money when I'm raising money for things, and I think, don't get me wrong, like I ask a lot of investors for money, right? But with him, I just didn't want to ask him. He gave me so much that I didn't want to ask. You know what I mean? I was going to UConn. I got out, and you can go to UConn for free in Connecticut. And I was going to UConn, and one night I was leaving the office at 8:15 or something, and he was like, "Where are you going?" And I was like, "I'm going to UConn." He's like, "Just stop that." And it was true. I was wasting my time going back to school trying to get my degree. He was like, "You're learning everything you ever need to know working here." And he was also a college dropout, by the way. So that made me a 2-time college dropout, which was a real overachiever move of mine. But at the end of the day, I think I could call him right now, and he'd probably hang out. But I just haven't really.
Well, what did he expect you to do? I mean, did he just want you to work for him for the rest of your life? I mean, was he going to groom you for a CEO position? Why would he be upset that you left?
No, I think he would have eventually, in many, many years, asked me to do something and run something for him, perhaps. But I think, I just was kind of I think I was ready to kind of try something new, try something on my own. And it's with him, it was like the New York Yankees every day. Right. And I was kind of I need to do something on my own. I need to start literally almost from scratch and kind of build my way up. And that was, seemed like the best route for me.
What was your first move after this face planting software company?
I fired the employees.
All of them?
Well, there was only a few of them.
Okay.
They were all developers, and I fired them all. They tried to kind of hijack the deal, and I'm like, you have a hostage situation with no hostage, so you're gone. So I just got rid of them all, hired new guys, and just started from scratch, which is sometimes the best thing to do.
Yeah. What was your next business venture after that?
So that's when I started working. So I did that for 6 years, but I started doing Kill Cliff on the side. And
now we get into the meat and potatoes of the issue.
And I started another company on the side called Trident Services.
Super original name.
I spelled it out like that so you could appreciate it.
Yeah.
That was pretty sophomoric, but it ended up doing really well. And Trident Services did fantastically. Killcliff, they were a tech-enabled national appraisal management company. So
what in the fuck does that mean?
Basically, it means a company that does appraisals for banks for real estate mortgages.
Okay. And
so we did, hundreds and hundreds a day, and all over the country, and just kind of, it was a really well run business by a guy who happens to be related to my wife that I brought in to run it, and it was just incredibly well executed. And it was interesting because for Killcliff, I had created this 50-page business plan because people told me, "Where's your business plan?" I was like, oh shit, I better write one. So I wrote this business plan, and then that wasn't good enough. So then I spent like $10,000 having like a professional business plan writer help me, which didn't help me. And then so for the Trident services, I was just like, okay, what is most important? And I created the 3 most essential elements of the business plan, put those on one slide, and told the 2 guys that I hired to run that, I was like, we're going to do these 3 things. We'll achieve success when we do these 3 things, and they did it.
Does it still exist?
Well, it was acquired last year by a bigger company.
Sweet.
Yeah, it was one of the last independent guys in the country. There'd been a massive consolidation in the last 5 years, and we were kind of like one of the last ones to go.
Okay.
And then Killcliff. So Killcliff.
Why don't you tell the story of why it's called what it is?
Yeah, so it all goes back to moving to Atlanta. I had an apartment in New York I couldn't get out of, and I bought a place in Atlanta. So I was like trying to find a roommate to, defray some of the costs of living in Atlanta while I still had a place in New York. So I found this kid, Cliff. And Cliff was like just the nicest guy ever. And he really was. He's like the greatest guy. And he's like 6'6", tennis player. He was getting his master's in like quantitative something or other at Georgia Tech, and brilliant guy, great guy. And he was my roommate. And then I would have my friends come to visit, from the Navy or like that Marine that hired me in New York or whomever. And they'd be like, who the hell is this guy? And I'd be like, oh, this is Cliff. He's my roommate. And they're like, oh my God, like we're not gonna be any girls tonight if he goes out with us, because he's like kind of a nerd, right? And so we'd go out, and like girls would like spread, like they would just be like a flock of birds just flying away. And so so as a joke, I started making these T-shirts that said "Kill Cliff," just as a joke. They were really popular, like really popular. Everybody wanted a Kill Cliff shirt,
Like in bars?
Yeah, we wore them to bars. Yeah, we wore them everywhere. And then one night, one of my friends and I were giving Cliff a hard time, and he got really mad at me. And all 6'6" of him, I'd posted an eviction notice on his door that like his failure to pick up girls and be cool and all that stuff was he was getting evicted for that, and it was signed like the Kill Cliff management team or something like that, and he didn't like that, and it was insulting.
Real sense of humor with this guy, huh?
Yeah, he's actually pretty funny. But so he pushed me, and like he's 6'6", and I'm barely pushing 5'9", and I go flying off my feet backwards into the refrigerator. Like refrigerator kind of falls backwards a little bit, and I'm like, that's it. Now I know I'd been working on this drink business idea, and I was like, now I know what I'm calling my drink company, Killcliff. And so he goes run into his room, and I go run into my room, and I'm like, he's going to register the domain name. So I registered it first.
Was he actually trying to register?
Yes. Yeah, he was. So I got the Killcliff domain by like literally probably 30 seconds.
You should have used your Navy SEAL hand-to-hand fighting techniques on him when he pushed you.
I can't reach his neck.
You could have uppercutted his balls.
True.
Yeah.
I know.
So you registered the domain name. That's one thing. Let's talk about the business.
Yeah. So the original idea was I didn't like Gatorade and I didn't like Red Bull, and I had been trying to find something in between that would be, recover, that might support recovery. Right. And I had read this article about ginger, and the ginger like had anti-inflammatory analgesic properties, and there had been a study done on it. And, it was not, I guess the study proved that it was analgesic. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make a ginger based drink and then put a lot of good stuff in it, and everything that makes it taste like shit, I'm just going to take that out. So that was kind of how it started. But I didn't have a name for it until Cliff and I got in the altercation, but I was gonna do it, and then I had also been struggling with the fact that one of my buddies, who was a damn neck, had passed away, one of my classmates, and I just didn't know how to do something, or like giving money wasn't enough. I was like, I need to do something bigger than like cutting a check.
More meaningful.
Yeah. And so the concept was, I'm going to create a business that is a sustainable giving platform for the Navy SEAL Foundation. And keep in mind, the Navy SEAL Foundation didn't exist when you got in the Navy and when I got in the Navy. Mm-hmm. I don't think it launched until, what, 2020 or 2000 or 2001.
I don't remember when, but it did not exist for sure when we got in.
Yeah. And so that was the other thing, like my friend dies and his little kid, there's no support or very little support. SGLI doesn't go very far. And I'm like, there's a big community, not big community, small community out there. Some of us will do some things that help. And so this was my way of trying to give back. But that's where it like kind of pulled it all together. And had it not had that purpose, we wouldn't be talking about it today, right? That was the thing that made it work, was it had a purpose. We're giving back to the community, and that would be meaningful over the long run.
How'd you grow it?
So as stupidly as humanly possible. So I was like, I started creating samples, all that stuff, and then I got to the formula that I liked. And of course, as you do, I ordered 8,000 cases of it. And my friend, who GW, comes over one day and he's like, "Hey, what's going on with that Kill Cliff thing you were trying to start?" And I was like, "Oh, I've got 8,000 cases." He's like,
"Where do you store 8,000 cases?"
"Yeah, in a big, expensive warehouse."
So you just really swung for the fences, just right out of the gate.
It was the minimum order quantity.
Was it really?
Yeah. So I was like, until I have a product, and like sleeving wasn't like a thing then, and if you did sleeving, it was like $1 a can or something like that. It's like 15 cents a can now, but back
super
then,
cost prohibitive back then.
So I was like, I'm just gonna make it work. And so he came on board in January 2011. We started selling product out of my car and his car up and down the street. We tried sponsoring people. The first person I ever sponsored was Amir Sadallah. You remember that guy?
No. I've never heard that fucking name in my life. How would I remember that guy?
He was a really, he was on, I think he was on the first season of The Ultimate Fighter.
What did you say? Amir Sadallah?
Amir Sadallah, yeah. Guy's fucking awesome.
Is he? Pull that shit up, Michael.
Yeah, I got it right here.
I've never seen that man in my life.
He's great.
Okay.
Yeah, he's funny as shit too. So anyway, he was an Ultimate Fighter contestant, and he was the cover of our website in the beginning. And anyway, we had little Kill Cliff logos on his shorts and shit like that. That like was a total faceplant. Like did not work at all. And then one day GW walked in and was like, "Hey, what do you think about CrossFit?" And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
What year was this?
2011.
Yeah. Okay, so it was still on, I would say personal description would be still on the ascent at that time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. I wasn't familiar with it. And so we went to a CrossFit gym and this guy showed up, Baker, and he was like, "I love this shit. I can help you sell it."
You randomly met Baker?
No, he showed up specifically for that meeting like he does.
Yeah.
And was just there, magically appeared in his magical white Subaru. And have you seen it? It's amazing.
Nothing about him makes sense.
Nothing at all.
Yeah.
So he showed up in his white Subaru, and I was like, I kind of like this guy. And he was like, "How many cases are you selling?" I was like, "I don't know. We might sell like 100 cases this month." He's like, "That's bullshit. I'm going to sell like 5,000 cases tomorrow." And I was like, "Okay, go for it, dude." So he did sell a lot of cases rapidly, and that got CrossFit started, and that's how we kind of started to ascend with CrossFit. That worked out really well.
Until it didn't.
True.
Yeah, that is such a wild ecosystem, the CrossFit world. I question the value of it now.
We're not very big in it now.
Yeah.
But we do still have, a lot of customers who order directly to their gyms and stuff like that. So it's been.
I'm not saying that the people who participated in it, and from a perspective of being able to sell, doesn't have value. I think an attachment to the organization itself has far less value than it did back in 2011, 2010.
Yeah, I mean, didn't private equity get in there or something?
I don't know the whole. I know that the ownership changed hands. I don't know shit about, and then I believe a new CEO came in. It's not the private equity that I think changed the value perspective. It's that the intellectual property was almost non-existent, and it certainly did change the face of, I would say, exercising. And I can say that based off. I remember when I first started working for CrossFit, you could go into any 24-hour fitness, and the only thing you would see was like the octagonal, classic, the double handles, one on each side for fucking back and buys and chest and tries. Yeah. And then if you wanted to do legs, go do legs, whatever. But also hit tries every day. And as I worked for CrossFit, I would kind of use like what I would see in Globo gyms as a marker of how far the methodology is infiltrating. Yeah. It's like, oh, damn, it's hard to find like a 24-hour fitness that doesn't have bumper plates now. Yeah. And then Olympic lifting platforms and then medicine balls and kettlebells. But now it's everywhere. Yep. And if it's everywhere, how much value does it actually have? If you can go anywhere and do it, what's the actual value of being associated with the organization? That's where I landed. Like I'm sure that there's value from the community. I just don't know if there's value from the business.
Yeah, I never really thought about that. I think in the beginning, being there were like category exclusives that you could have as a sponsor.
Yeah, you guys were the title beverage sponsor for a couple of years.
Yeah, and that was hyper competitive. Like everybody wanted to knock us out of that.
The Fit Aids of the world or whatever.
Yeah, those other guys. But it ended up being, at the end of the day, it was a great place to be. I liked everybody in the organization. It was fun. It was a cool experience, and it was like as a startup for what it's worth, and like kind of growing a business. It was just a fun, cool place to be growing. You know what I mean? And it was a good vibe. For what it's worth, until it wasn't.
I was going to say, and then you got forced out of the company.
Yeah. So So basically, the problem with these types of businesses is when you're successful, you create something I like to call a cash hole. So you have to continue to manufacture more product to supply the ever-growing demand on terms that may or may not be really good to producing more and more supply, right? So therefore, you got to keep fronting more money. And then what ends up happening is, like, let's say you sell it to an Anheuser-Busch distributor, and they have, they pay you in 90 days or something like that. So you basically paid money 45 days before you produced it. It took you 30 to 60 days to sell to the Anheuser-Busch distributor, and now they pay you 90 days later. So that hole gets bigger.
It's like 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So you need more capital. So I made the brilliant decision to, bring in some capital. And the first couple rounds, like small rounds of capital, were fine. It was the institutional round that kind of hurt us. Some guys came in with hey, we've done this, we've played this game, 20 times, and this is how we do it. No, maybe they said 14 times. We've done this 14 times, and this is how you do it. If you follow our playbook, we'll be great, and you'll crush it. And so I was like, okay, cool. I was naive, and I did, and like then we started coming to things. I'll be like, hey, I don't think that's like we should spend money on that. Like that's a waste of money, right? And they'd be like. And this one dude literally said this to me. He said, "You're going to spend the money, or we're going to fire you and find a CEO who will." And I was like, "Why would you say that?"
Why would you say that? Wouldn't you want to spend money on things that are effective, not just shit you've done in the past that may or may not be effective?
Yeah. So sometimes the objectives aren't aligned. My objective was to get the business to profitability, grow it as fast as possible, and create this, great trajectory so we could, either be profitable or sell it or whatever. That's typical. I had control of the business. That guy didn't. And what I didn't realize was he only really did control deals. So his way of getting control was by putting more money in the company. So the way to put more money in the company was to get me to spend it on stupid shit. So you spend it on things that don't have any good return on the ad spend, and next thing you know, you're asking for more money, and you're losing board seats and everything else.
Because you're obviously, the money's not free, so you're trading either shares, seats, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
combination of all the above.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So, yeah, I fell into that trap, and one day, so then it was like, you need to fill out your team with all these badasses, right? Like these different people with these great resumes and all that stuff. And I was like, I don't really want to work with that guy. You know, they'd be like, well, you gotta fill this position. I was like, no, I don't. We're doing it without him. Like, why do we need that guy? Like, he's a total loser. And so, got my arm twisted. Hey, you gotta do this to be a real company. So did a couple of those moves, and those things, some of those folks where I was like going against what I really felt was right. Well, those were mistakes, right, by me, and I shouldn't have done it. And if I had put my foot down sooner, I think it would have been a better outcome, but because I was like, okay, these guys have done this 14 times, I should listen to them. It just didn't end up being great. And, at the end of the day, I think everybody was trying to do their job professionally. With that being said, I walk into a board meeting one day, and my subject I want to talk about with the board is, hey, this new guy we hired to be like our COO he's not capable of doing it. Like he shouldn't be here. And he's a nice guy, don't get me wrong, but he's just not capable. And so, but I sit down, the first thing he said is, today's your last day. And I'm like, okay, all right. And I guess they were afraid I was going to lose my mind and start beating people up in the boardroom or something like that.
Navy SEAL hand-to-hand tactics.
Exactly. That like this part of the wrist to the forehead. Yeah.
It's available at firehands.com.
So,
Michael, don't go to that website because I don't fucking know what that.
I was just about to.
Don't do it. I have no idea what I'm sure we're on plenty of lists. We don't need to be on that one.
Yeah. So anyway, I end up, I'm like, so they're like, hey, this is your last day, and I'm like, okay, like who's going to replace me? And they're like, this guy, and I'm like, I was actually going to tell you today he's not competent to do the job he's doing today, so God forbid like you put him in my shoes. And so that started a domino effect of like they stuck to their decision. And like I would agree that I wasn't the best guy to run that company, definitely not the best guy to run that company, but I was the best guy they had. And so at the end of the day, like I should have stayed in that seat until we found someone that could really run it, because that was followed by, so that guy running it for like, I think 30 days he lasted. He got fired. Then a guy from the VC fund came in and tried to run it for like 6 months. He brought in another CEO who ran it for a few years. And if you look at the quarterly numbers, they just went, kind of stair step down over time, until they got rid of that guy and some new investors had come in. Some new investors had come in first. And then that guy ended up leaving as well. And then, Timar? Yeah, so Timar was there he first came in as an advisor to the CEO and all that stuff, and then he became the CEO. But the main theme of why the company like kind of struggled to find its way was the investors these institutional investors really wanted to follow this retail route to growing the business and creating value and then selling it, right? And I had always said, this is a direct-to-consumer business. Like our customers are like, they're kind of hard to find. They're not walking up and down the grocery store aisle for the most part. There's a few that are, but for the most part, they're out there scattered out at CrossFit gyms or they're, first responders or whatever, but they're going to find us through word of mouth and whatever. And that's how they were finding us, right? So the data show they were finding us that way. We always had more than half our business was direct to consumer online. It's still that. Right. And this retail thing is great, but it's, retail, the way it's done today is kind of a dying business. Like people don't walk up and down the aisles as much as they used to. They do Instacart.
I can't imagine trying to educate somebody use a gas station as an analogy.
Right.
If somebody doesn't know what Kill Cliff is,
yep,
and you go to the vertical freezer with the huge glass door that it would be in, there's 50 other fucking drinks in there.
Yeah.
You're not educating. Nobody's going there for like an education and a recovery beverage. I mean, I'm sure there are some people who are, but the mass majority know where they're going.
Right.
Because they know what they want to get. They open the door, they grab it, they go. Like,
Right.
I can't even fathom trying to educate the consumer in that environment.
It's tough. There were anecdotes of like we were in a Kroger in Atlanta called Disco Kroger, and for some reason the product was like flying off the shelf in the cold box where people come in and grab a grab and go meal after they work out. It was next to an LA Fitness, grab a grab and go meal, and then it was something like 52 units per week were coming out of 2 slots on that refrigerator.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But what we figured out was there's a bar down the street, and that bar served Killcliff. So Killcliff
Tito's and
vodka.
Killcliff is the best ever. Still my favorite, the orange.
Yes. Yeah, it's
it
might have been engineered for that.
May or may not have a hoard of Killcliff that I use for exactly those things. I remember the day you got let go because we were texting about it. I was sitting on an airplane pre-breathing in a Killcliff wingsuit.
Oh, wow.
There's the day that I went up and did the record jump up in Davis.
Yep.
You're like, I was going to tell you later.
Yeah. Man, that and things were like, if my Twitter profile is still you jumping out of the can. What was your buddy's name?
Steve.
Yeah.
Triple S.
Yeah. You jumping out of the Steve
Killcliff
jumping
can.
you in a can, and then
Yeah.
you jumping out of the can. That's my Twitter profile picture.
Totally legal.
Yeah. Isn't it cool? It is like still one of the coolest things I've ever seen done in my life.
Yeah. I should probably...
By the way,
I'm just going to repost that and tell people I have your permission to do so.
please, you have my permission.
Perfect.
Yeah. By the way, so your jump.
Yep.
My son comes home from school and like in 5th or 6th grade or something like that, they had,
Talking about the wingsuit one?
Yeah, the long distance, highest, longest, all that stuff. He comes home from school and he's like, oh, we talked about in like science today? And I was like, no. He's like, this guy, Andy, jumped out of a plane, like flew like 1,000,000 miles. And he's like, oh, Killcliff. My dad started that company. So I thought that was kind of cool. They're teaching it to children now.
They're probably teaching children physics. I'm not so sure that they're worried that much about the wingsuit.
I think my son, only thing he took away from that was like jumping out of an airplane with a wingsuit on. It seems really cool.
I would hope that that's all anybody would take away from a lesson like that. Right. Fuck, I would have hated that class. So what did they get wrong when you got pushed out? I do remember a churn of executives. What was I doing at that time? So you guys were actually my first sponsor. Killcliff was the first sponsor I had. Was it Yumi and Baker in that bar that had the idea for the wingsuit jump in the first place?
I probably don't remember.
It was in Boston.
Oh, yeah. At one of the CrossFit events.
Yes. You're like, you should do this. I'm like, I've never jumped a wingsuit, but let's do it. And like 8 months later, off we went. So you guys sponsored that. That was my entryway into professional skydiving and base jumping, which grew. And then G-Dub left. I took over his job for a bit. He came back. I forget how long ago I left. What did they fuck up, though? What was stair-stepping down the sales?
So once that new CEO got in there, he started changing the brand, and it started losing its authenticity. One of the things about the brand was it was authentic, right? It was like we had this like 3-part thing where it's like, hey, we're solemnly supporters of our armed forces, particular our special operators. We're funny, and we take working out seriously, right? And then we kind of wove those tones together, and that was authentic. And then it started turning into like I don't know what he was doing, but he's trying to change the whole tone of everything, and it was just like too far in the wrong direction. And then at the same time, you have a founder who's got hundreds and hundreds of relationships with people around the country, and when they booted me out, I mean, they cut me clean. Right. I was able to come to board meetings because I was still on the board, but I wasn't able to do anything with the business. And I was like, you guys don't want my help. I'd be happy to help. And I didn't get mad. I tried to handle it like a gentleman. And it was just like a no. And I was like, wow, that's really weird. And a few months after I left, the guy who fired me called me up and was like, hey, this is my mea culpa. Like, I now realize that you shouldn't just cut founders out of an organization like this, what it does to the organization. So I think that was part of it, but it's it really began to lose authenticity. It started seeming corporate, and it was too small to make that move. Right, it was just too small. It hadn't hit mainstream yet, or whatever. And then again, like I was like, they always want to do all this sampling. Right, like have these sampling teams out there, like Red Bull or whatever. You know, I'm like, we have like 3,000 CrossFit gyms selling our product. We don't need to do sampling. It's paid sampling now. Like these people are buying it. They love the brand. Why spend all this money? Yeah. So anyway, so I think things started just kind of, and then also they chased CrossFit at that point. Like they looked at CrossFit as that was going to be the end all be all thing. And I had been lucky, you know, Erwin had helped out and we had done this thing with the foundation. By the way, that's a kind of interesting story how the foundation came into play. But
with Killcliff?
Yeah.
The SEAL Foundation? How so? So
when I started it, you know, it was like the vision was, hey, give money back to the Navy SEAL Foundation. And I knew a guy, he was the first XO of Damneck. And I called him up and I said, hey, you know, Mr. So-and-so, may I say we give money to the Navy SEAL Foundation on the side of our cans? And he said, yeah, we need all the advertising we can get. And I was like, thank you, sir. So I put that on there. And then we just started firing off like $5,000 checks here or there, maybe 1,000, whatever we could afford. And we couldn't afford it. Right. But I was like, hey, this is just the way we're going to do it. We're just like, we're going to give until it hurts and then we're going to give more. Right. And so anyway, they basically reached out one day and they're like, hey, and Erwin knew them. So Erwin knew people at the command, or at not the command, the foundation. Mm-hmm. And they were like, hey, we'd like to have a meeting. So we get together and they're like, so team guys keep calling up and going, who the hell are these guys? And they're like, we don't know, but they send us checks all the time and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So we got together and they're like, you know, everybody calls us and asks for something. Everybody wants something from us. And you guys never asked. You just started giving us things. So, you know, let's talk about partnering up. And so that's how that happened. And that was like a success to me. Like that was one of the things where I was like, hey, this is, you know, this means something. It means something to the community. And I'll never forget, I was at, you know, kind of along that line. I was at the CrossFit Games one year. And you know how you notice, like, there's two dudes over there, like 100 yards away, but they're looking at me, you know?
This is a weird story, but tell me more.
Yeah. So these guys are like over there and I'm like, one's kind of dressed like CrossFit style and one guy is not. And they keep getting closer and closer and then they're like right in front of me. Like they kind of disappear for a second. And I'm like, hey guys, what's up? And they're like, are you Todd? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, I'm Jim and I'm Bob and we're both from Team 3. And I was like, oh, no shit, cool. Great to meet you guys. Thanks for coming. Here's some drinks, you know? And they're like, no, thank you. And I was like, for what? And they're like, we're downrange having a really bad portion of our deployment. And all of a sudden, all these boxes at Killcliff showed up. And, you know, we used to have those white boxes with the Killcliff logo. Like, we sent like hundreds and hundreds of those downrange. And it was like exactly what we needed at that moment in time. And we knew there were people out there that gave a shit about what we were doing. And I was like, man, you know, that was the intent, but I never thought it would actually work. Right. Yeah. Like I never thought it would work, but it did. So it was like kind of cool like that kind of worked its way all the way through. And that was like success to me. So that's why like I didn't get upset or anything when it all went down. And I also thought, I was like, these guys are basically, you know, they must know what they're doing, right? Nobody would do anything this stupid and try to shoot themselves in the foot, but it just didn't work out, right? So I guess I should continue the story now. So more guys came in and invested more money. They kept going after the same, you know, retail strategy, and it's a very expensive strategy. It takes huge tens of millions of dollars to go down that route, and then there was this investor who was a really great guy who came in and he was putting in more money. He was a very, very wealthy man. He's putting in more money, and this is you know, kind of the last couple of years, and he was really going to help the brand kind of turn the corner and take off again. And then last summer he died, and then that's when I kind of came back on the scene a little bit. Where
before you get to how you came back on the scene, what were you doing in the time between when you left and coming back on the scene?
I was just doing what I do, starting companies, building them, trying to create value.
What'd you start?
I started a company that basically lent money. It was a factoring business, a technology-based factoring business, so kind of a fintech business. We built it and sold.
It was for truck drivers, right?
Yeah. Sold most of it to a bank, and then when we did that, my partner and I were kind of looking at each other. I was like, "There's all these cool little opportunities that aren't like they're not going to be $1 billion opportunities, but they're going to be worth a lot if somebody does them right." That we had seen in our experience. So we're like, why don't we go try to build all these little things? So now, then we started what's called a venture studio, where we basically build new businesses and invest money in them. And, it's mostly technology.
Is it exciting?
It's the most fun I've ever had at work.
Really?
Yeah, it's amazing.
What do you enjoy so much about it?
So it's all problem solving all the time. Like every day you're just like literally problem solving. And then when you get something solved, you're like, yes, I fixed that, or I made it work, or whatever, or I found the solution. And that's what entrepreneurship is. It's just a constant challenge to, okay, how am I not going to get kicked in the nuts today and solve something at the same time. Right. So it, and you probably know what I mean, so I think like I love doing that. And I also realize that actually starting things is way harder than people realize. Like, I guess everybody says that. I was too stupid to realize it. So I just kept starting things, but they kind of kept working. Right. So I was like, okay, I'm a little bit better at starting things than other people are and getting them to like cash flowing or whatever. So that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So that's what I do now.
Okay. How far from the original brand that you had created have you stepped back into now? Like how far off the beaten path had Killcliff gotten?
So it kind of whipsawed around a little bit, right? So it went from like, it went from what it was, which was, I think, let me put it this way. A CEO of an incredibly successful company that was sold for hundreds of millions of dollars, who knows that space incredibly well, told me, he's like, that was the coolest brand there was for like 3 years, right? So it went from that to something that was unrecognizable. Like I was like, what the hell is this? Like, it doesn't even make sense. But it was still working in its own way. To go and kind of swinging back the other way, past that, to more of a guy focused thing. Like super. Like hey, pretty aggressive tone to it. So it swung back a little bit the other way. I think, and that's fine. Like it worked. Now I think it's like just kind of like fine tuning everything and getting it like all kind of going and rowing in the same direction, kind of like morphed into a few different things at the same time.
So did you essentially have a chance to buy back your company?
Yes. I
Okay.
bought it back.
How many people did you fire?
A lot.
Yes. What are their names and why?
Well, one thing is, I mean, in their defense, not everybody's.
That's not what we're here for.
I know. I mean, not everybody's going to be a good fit all the time and what have you, right? So I think like sometimes when something's been, like you move into a place and you're like, but they didn't like move out. And you kind of like open the closet. You're like, what the fuck is this? Like, you're like, what is this? And like, why hasn't anybody like done, service on the air conditioning unit in like 4 years or whatever? I've been out for a while and a lot of things had changed and not for the better. So our COGS, like cost of producing the product, had gone up like over 40%.
Why?
I don't know. It should have gone down. Right. So that's the weird thing.
If you're going to produce more, you would think that your COGS would go down.
Yeah. So I just think nobody was like paying attention to that. So you had a lot of things like that, and not that like I'm the end all be all business manager. I'm definitely not, but like I pay attention to like how much does this can cost for this production run compared to the production run before it. Why did it go up? Why did it go down? Okay, shipping costs more. I can buy that right now. We're in a higher shipping cycle, but we shouldn't be paying this much more for the aluminum or whatever if things didn't change, right?
Yeah.
So you got to constantly be analyzing that, and I just think the way the business was run, that wasn't how they were thinking about it, and so when you get back into it and you start, kind of like pulling things back, you start finding things. You're like, okay, we can do this better, and this better. And it's not necessarily, fixing it. It's just adjusting it to its optimal performance level. It's kind of like getting you get a car and it's an 8-cylinder or something like that. And you're like, okay, this thing's got like 500 horsepower, but it's running like it's got 350, right? It just needs a tune up. So that's where we are right now.
If you hadn't have bought the shares back, what do you think would have happened with the company?
Someone would have bought them. I just got, the truth is I was in the right place at the right time to buy them back. And I had a good enough relationship from being a gentleman over the years that I didn't burn any bridges with anyone. And so everybody kind of let it happen. And I think, there were other buyers out there. They were just moving slower than I was. So for what it's worth, I'm happy I did it. I feel good about it. Like the brand is thriving now, although we're still struggling, like operationally, you might say, but we'll get that stuff straightened out.
How many of the original, if any, employees remained when you took back over, or they had churned through everybody?
The only guy that was still kind of hanging around was GW.
Really?
Yeah. Baker had a little tiny role as GW wasn't a full-time employee. He's like a consultant.
Yeah.
And Baker had a little consulting deal, but everybody else was gone.
Did Baker try to talk you into doing your Twitter stuff?
He was doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That checks out. Makes sense.
Yeah. He pulled up in his white Subaru.
Yeah. Yeah. I can always tell when Baker's responsible for brands' Twitter accounts just because it's trash. And that's the mark of Baker. And I would say that if he was sitting right here.
I think he does a pretty good job.
There's few things I enjoy more than talking shit directly to Baker.
Through this podcast?
Not generally through. I don't know if his name has ever come up. I doubt he listens to it, so he'll never probably hear it. But I'll just repeat all these things the next time I see him directly to his face.
Yeah.
Because I think he runs the Twitter for Black Rifle Coffee, too.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's why its engagement is just like same as a fucking Purina dog chow, probably. It's just trash. Yeah, if I'm being honest, I stopped paying attention pretty closely to Killcliff when I moved on. And I left on good terms as well, too. And then I'm like, spicy pineapple with Joe. I saw you guys did something with Izzy. And I was like, I don't know if this brand knows who they want to be.
Yeah. I think the Joe stuff was incredible. I mean, that's John's, his work on that stuff.
It has to be more than just that, though. Don't get me wrong. Joe is a fucking powerhouse.
Yep.
By far the most powerful podcast platform on earth. But at the end of the day, there's a market cap on how many people would be energized to buy something because he might be involved in it.
True.
You'll probably get a great bump to begin with, but
Well, our best-selling product is still the original product.
Which flavor was the
original?
Tasty,
the orange,
the red one,
the orange. The original product was that orange, the one you mix with Tito's.
Yeah. Well, just so you know, I've done robust testing. You can mix all the flavors with Tito's.
You can. Yeah. It has an incredible masking effect.
Holy shit! The orange one.
Yeah.
If you have just a hint of color in there, I'm not giving advice to anybody as I speak about this now. Please drink responsibly. Don't drink and drive. All the things that we have to say. Yeah, you could do if you were to fill it to this line right here, I'll call that a 2-finger pour. Just go. Splash a Killcliff for color. It's pretty goddamn good.
Yeah, I stopped doing that because of that. I was like, I don't even know how much I'm putting in this drink anymore.
Yeah.
So unless I'm...
But what kind of weirdo actually is measuring? God damn, dude. Take the reins off a little bit.
Just
I know.
Yeah.
No, it's a great mixer, for sure. It is. I have exposed many people to it, and takes the edge off next day a little bit.
Yeah, it does.
Some vitamins, minerals inside of there.
Yeah. The ginger. It's the ginger.
It's not the ginger at all. It might be the ginger. I don't know.
Yeah. Have you tried the CBD version?
Yeah.
That's
only the orange one.
That's even better for like hangovers and stuff. Like I swear by that one. But anyway, I think that's part of the process that needs to take place is kind of like reestablishing what is this brand, like where is it going, kind of the brand voice needs to be, consolidated, you might say. But Joe's been incredible. Love what he's done for us, and that's it's just kind of cool.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
No, don't get me wrong. If you, as far as powerful brand partners, he's an A-game player for sure. He'll move the needle for sure. But if the business behind what he's moving the needle on doesn't know who they are,
right?
What's the point?
Yeah. So I think that's like I said before, there was a strategy that was kind of going one way, and the brand itself kind of needed to go another way. And so that torsion really kind of pulled the brand apart for a long time between the investors, the board, and the guys running the business. Now that all that has consolidated under me, basically, I think I have a chance to kind of reset it all and get it going in the right direction. And that's what I'm doing.
What's your strategy?
Moving more towards a human performance angle. There's a product that I think we're gonna work on releasing that I think is gonna change the game in a big way, and I think kind of like just having different levels of human performance in there will be meaningful. And like I take this stuff seriously. Like I want to sell things that people want to drink and consume, and that are good for them. And so I think the human performance angle matters, and we're going to start like kind of really being more focused on human performance at the end of the day.
Are you talking like apex human performance, or are we talking longevity?
I think there's okay, so where I'm going with this is basically
just tell us the corporate secrets.
Yeah.
What is this secret product that won't be out, but perhaps Michael could right now register a domain name? You see what I'm saying, Michael? Listen intently.
We'll
sell it back to you. It's fine.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I think there's some exciting new technology that can now go into a drink that we can incorporate into our beverage, and it's going to be a game changer. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's coming.
Leave it at that if you want to. The reason I ask, the pros and cons of CrossFit marketing back in the day.
Yep.
They picked inspirational and aspirational communities.
Right.
Mill, fire, just call it first responder military space. Not many people are going to do that job, but a lot of people, they're inspired or have aspirations to do that. So it's a great marketing tool to a degree. And then you can kind of look at where the company is right now. It's like,
right.
Okay, you probably outgrew that, and I don't think they evolved into what could have been next. The apex athletes, I feel like will always take care of themselves.
Yeah, of course.
It's
they're going to find the solutions.
The fact that 60% of Americans are obese, like that's a fucking problem.
Yep.
And I think that there is such.
I got a solution for that.
Is it work out and don't stuff your fucking face? Because that is a solution for that. You're welcome. Yeah. Yeah. Do you mean? Oh God! Don't get me started. I almost just said some wildly inappropriate things. But
I know what you mean.
But that's. What's the apex market? Like fucking 0.001%, whereas that other 60% of the U.S. population will be 330 million, so that'd put you at 210 million people right there that need as much help as they can possibly get.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the goal here is to democratize that apex nutrition for the average person, right? Where they can get a piece of that affordably, daily, that helps them kind of deal with whatever they're dealing with. They get beyond their, sugar cravings or whatever it might be. And so I think there's some things we can do there that can have a big impact, not just for, the apex athlete, but for the average, person.
Yeah.
I kind of I always thought they're SEALs and they have a certain need for a certain amount of nutrition or whatever, but everybody should have access to those things, right? But at the same time, the SEALs really didn't have access when I was in. We didn't we had Gatorade and pizzas after Hell Week, right?
Fuck yeah. I think they're still doing that, and I hope they are because that's a legacy passed out.
Yeah, it's a tradition.
I got a red Gatorade, one of those huge ones,
Yep.
and a pepperoni pizza with my brown T-shirt when I got through Hell Week.
Yeah, me too.
I smashed both of them.
Yeah, me too. And then I woke up about 4 or 5 hours later and went to go to the bathroom, and the guy that was like the little checkout clerk was like, "What's your name?" I'm like, "Dude, we're fucking roommates. What are you talking about?" Like, he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude, what are you talking about?" I don't want to say the guy's name. And he was like, "Dude, no." And go look at yourself in the mirror. And I went in and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like I have red hair, right? It just looks like a basketball.
Yeah.
Like my face and head,
Puffed out.
swollen up so bad. It was weird.
Yeah, it's not the easiest course of instruction by design.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's the problem with even if the most awesome product in the world, if you guys create it, which I'm sure you will, still has an essence of hard work.
Yeah,
associated with that,
for sure. Yeah, and I don't think like the goal here isn't to do that. Like we're not gonna. There's no silver bullet, right? But there's the inspiration part of it, and then there is the kind of like giving somebody the basic thing that they need to get to the next level or to achieve what they're trying to achieve. So that's
well, and all the entrepreneurial journeys that you've done. What's the best decision you've made?
Man, that's a great question.
Well, don't worry. I bet you can guess the second one.
So
there's going to be a follow-up.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So it's the jury's still out, right? Because Killcliff buying it back could be the best decision I ever made.
Okay. And how recently did that occur, actually?
February.
Okay. Yeah. So the jury's definitely still out.
Yeah. So that's still out. With that being said, most of the decisions that have been successful have been the ones where everybody told me to do one thing and I went a different way. So, there's generally people have like a herd mentality or they've got, certain things they think. And like the point is like everybody's doing the easy shit. Like it's so hard to compete with all that stuff. You got to do something that's harder and you got to find an angle that other people aren't taking. And and when you do that, people are going to tell you that's stupid. It's not going to work. Nobody does that or whatever. But every time I do, I find a way to win. And so the point is opening my venture studio where we're building new software companies. It's just one of the best things I've ever done in my life because not only am I having more fun, I'm investing money in businesses I want to be a part of, and that's working kind of like a bell curve of, startups do. And then you're in the game, right? And when you're in the game and you have multiple hands on the table, then you have more chances of winning instead of having like a binary way. That's why like Killcliff, when they fired me, it didn't hurt me because I was like, I'm in the game in multiple places and I'll keep playing those other hands. And so at the end of the day that, I just played the game long enough until I was back in that game. So I think that being diversified, if I can say that, if that's what it is, which people told me not to do. They're like, you need to be focused. I'm like, where'd you learn that? They're like, oh, my MBA school. And I'm like, okay, I'm a 2-time college dropout. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, and that is doing multiple things at the same time. And in the beginning, I didn't know how to do it, right? I was trying to do multiple things at the same time, but now I've set up a structure that allows me to be involved in, more than a handful of organizations and bring, not just – like leadership is kind of used cheaply in this stuff, but like bring ideas and problem solving skills to bear that founder or CEO might not have on their own, that I can come in there and like leverage them with, or leverage their opportunity with to make them better. So I think
where'd you get those skills from?
I don't know. I actually will say this. I will say, I believe that the teams are a self-selection process, right? And one of the ways that you make it through that process is through kind of being able to laugh at yourself and everybody around you and kind of have a good sense of humor about it. The other is just like being able to think a little bit more long-term about like, okay, yeah, this sucks right now, but like what's it going to mean in, 6 months or a year? What's going to be better about it, right? So I think that like some of those skills, like there was like a lot of independence and independent decision making in the teams that had a big effect on me. Like I could see where like team guys were making decisions like away from like the normal way things were done in the military to be better at what they did. And so So I think it was forged there. And then I think that made me better going forward, because that's what made me successful with that mentor I had that I mentioned that I worked for 7 years. Like, he would throw stuff at me and be like, hey, just go figure this out. And I would go figure it out, right? So it's the same thing. It's like finding that path forward. And a lot of people want to just be like, hey, you know, I looked at this, there's no path forward, it's over. And I'm like, no, there's always a path forward. There's always a way forward.
I describe special operations as nonlinear problem solving.
Right.
I mean, if you look at it at the end of the day, that we spend a robust amount of time planning.
Yep.
And then you go out the door and your plan's like, well, that shit didn't happen.
Yep.
And it's at a macro level and a micro level. Everything from like, hey, the weather sucks, we got to land somewhere else. Here's a new path you have to take to target, to this satellite imagery you stared at for 72 hours. The door's actually on the other side of the structure, which there's a shit-filled moat along the way, which hopefully somebody's going to fucking fall in, because I love humor like anybody else does. And everything is just solving problems real time based off of playbook of, you know, TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that's the thing. And like, when you have also, like, kind of when you have skin in the game, right? So special operations guys, team guys have skin in the game, their own. Literally, they have skin in the game. That matters, and they're going to find a way out. In business, you know, a lot of people are playing with other people's money, and they don't have skin in the game. I have skin in the game in everything I do. And that's the difference. Now, I didn't always. I had to get there with, like, you know, some other people's, you know, money to begin with.
Isn't it incredibly common, if not the majority of the time, you are playing with other people's money?
Yeah, somebody always has other people are always involved in the stuff I do, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that I'm usually now it wasn't always. Like, it took me, like, I had to get here where I could be the guy putting the skin in the game, right?
You can just flaunt your wealth publicly if you want to. It's what you're doing around, you know, beating around the bush.
No, that's not.
I saw the Gulfstream you came in here on.
Yeah, I wish.
I'm fucking with you, man.
But
No, but what you're talking about is stacking dominoes to the point where you can have a lot more control over what's going on, because you have the ability through years of success on top of success to be able to do that.
no, I'm actually saying something different. I'm saying
Well, we're going to edit that part out, because what I just said was amazing and can be on a bumper sticker.
I'm going all in on the things I work on. Meaning, like, I'm like, a lot of people take a very cautious approach to this stuff. I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I need to be all in and work on it myself and everything else. And even if it's just mentally, you didn't actually put any money in, like, you've got to find a way to move forward when there doesn't seem like there is one. And too many people, really smart, well-educated people, find ways to quit that I just can't wrap my head around. Like, I see it all the time, and I'm like, okay, you just said we can't do this. And literally, I just spent 2 hours and I figured it out, right? Like, you've been working on this for 2 months and we couldn't do it, but I spent 2 hours and figured it out. So,
Todd, I think most people spend their life looking for reasons why they can't do something.
Yeah, I agree.
Because being able to identify some boundary or barrier and saying, I can't do it because of that, is way easier to internally justify in the mirror than, like, I gave it everything I fucking could and it wasn't the right time, or I wasn't good enough to accomplish. Like, one, you're like, it was the obstacle's fault. The other one, you're like, yeah,
or
my fault.
I like, my boss didn't tell me how to do my job well enough to be able to do it. Like, no, fucking figure it out. Like, figure out your job. Like, sure, is it your job, your boss's responsibility to tell you what you need to do and what your roles and responsibilities are? Yeah, but, like, he can't predict every single thing you're going to have to do in your job, right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem with people, is they're just like, well, I've reached the limit of the roles and responsibilities I've been told how to do, so therefore I'm going to not do anything else.
Or pair that with being terrified of failure.
Yeah, that's one thing I learned about that I didn't know, that I didn't understand. So we started doing these tests on people at Kill Cliff back in the day. And that's so
like laboratory tests?
No, I like,
it's far less interesting. Like prick tests.
I started dropping things in people's drinks. Yeah. No. Basically, I was like, okay, there's a couple of people on the team. I'm just not clicking with them, and I don't know why. So I brought in this industrial psychologist, but at the same time, I knew that somebody on the team was like a sociopath, right? And so I basically had the industrial psychologist test everybody on the team.
Is what you're describing legal, or are we going to have to cut this out later?
Totally legal.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And we're just trying to, like, get a baseline for how people work so we can work with them better, right?
Yeah.
So we test everybody, and the psychologist is like, okay, cool. So here's the deal. you got some great people on your team. You also have 2 people that are like borderline, fall into the category you don't want.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And so we dug into it, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about people, how they operate, why they're wired, and now I've adopted that for everything. I've heard it's a lot like the tests over at your old command.
It was a standard personality test.
Oh, really?
I don't remember. Again, I went through selection 2002.
I think they've enhanced it.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I do remember we sat back in the second phase classroom and took these fucking bubble tests for hours. That personality, it's probably a very standard personality test. I would reduce it down to they're basically asking you like 5 or 6 questions.
Thousands of times.
Like 60 different ways.
Yeah, right.
Right. Like, and you can't say yes or no. It's like strongly agree, strongly disagree, and then versions or lighter versions of that in between. But I think another benefit of the community that we come from, I mean, how many times did you encounter failure in BUDS or in the SEAL teams? It's like
pretty often.
Pretty much daily.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, shit, that didn't work. But it's not like you stop.
Yeah.
You just look for another way to get around it, right? Like, hey, don't try to smash your head through the wall. Have you considered going around the wall, over the wall, under the wall, tunnel, like breach the wall? It's a headspace that I think if people can get comfortable with, it has a huge benefit in their life. But failure is just a bitch for a lot. I think people are actually more terrified of failure than anything else.
Absolutely.
And it is 100% self-limiting ideology if you embrace that.
Yeah, I mean, look at like Elon Musk, right? This guy had hundreds of millions of dollars and invested it all of it, went all in. Like, think about it. Like, you have a few $100 million and you invest every single dime of it in your new endeavors. That's pretty ballsy. He was not afraid to fail.
Yeah.
Or he was, and he just worked his ass off or whatever. But I mean, but the point is, who would do that? Nobody does that.
When they do, or when people do that, I think that's where exceptional things come from.
Right.
Sometimes. It could also be exceptional failure.
Yeah, it's I mean, I think there's I mean, very few people do it. Yeah. But I think at the same time, you just see this a lot where, it just seems to me there's always a path forward. And if you're careful with your resources and your processes and kind of keep things like in line, you don't waste things, then there's a path forward. You just have to find it. And it's not always what you think it is, right? That's the thing is like people they're like, okay, we're going to run this playbook, it's going to work, right? Like, okay, we've run that playbook 3 times. Like, let's try something different, right? And let's stop wasting money on things that don't make money, right? So I think, that ability to find the path forward, and investors don't always get it, by the way. They're like, oh, wait, this doesn't look exactly like this. Like, this pattern doesn't match, so therefore I can't invest or whatever. And I would always say, actually, shouldn't the best investments not match an existing pattern, right?
I don't know. You tell me. You're the entrepreneur. There's pros. I could see it go. You could either have a catastrophic failure or a resounding success.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the pattern matches another pattern, then generally the returns are lower, right? So somebody's already figured that pattern out, and there's money that's already made its way to that area and is investing in that area. So therefore, it's flattened out the returns generally. And the other, like where you find new patterns, there's more upside because that pattern hasn't been figured out yet. So the money that goes there, you're going to get multiples of return on it. So that's the point is like, if you look at the venture capital market, not that I'm an expert in venture capital, but, there was a lot of money out there chasing the same ideas that drove the value of all these startups up, like in a crazy way over the last few years. And that's where my partner and I were just like, gosh, these valuations are out of control. This is like crazy. Like, what is going on? And so we were like, let's take a different approach to it and attack it from a different angle. So again, that would go back to, hey, the way special operations guys look at things like, hey, we're not the Army. We're not just going to roll in with tanks. We've got to find a different way to do this.
Yeah. What's the biggest mistake you've made in your entrepreneurial journey?
So this is a double-edged sword, but I trusted people when I shouldn't have trusted them, and but trust is the most important thing in business.
Did you have doubt when you put your trust in those people, or was it something you just figured out later on down the run?
So now I'm better attuned to understand why I should have doubt and when I should have doubt than I did in the past. But I now look back and remember the red flags that were there that would have told me. In fact, now we have this thing we call no more red flags in my business, where if we see one of these behaviors pop up anywhere in the process, it's just no.
Yeah.
Like we're not going to argue about it. Just no.
Hard stop.
Yeah.
Fair. It's fair.
But trust is the hardest thing to manage, right? And when you find people in your organization that you can't build trust with, that tells you everything you need to know there. Like, if you can't build trust with somebody, they got to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. It's, yeah, I mean, it even goes into like leadership equity.
Yep.
People think from the military that because the collar device that you wear is going to elicit behavior from somebody that might end up taking their life. It's like, I can't speak intelligently on the conventional side of the house, but I really don't give a shit what the collar device is of somebody telling me to do something galactically stupid.
Right.
Especially if I don't trust them. Like, how
Right.
about I have a better idea. In my pocket, I have this for you, and you can go fuck yourself. Probably would have different terms depending on what was going on at the time, but it's trust in a disciplined leader that actually empowers and enables subordinates to do shit that a lot of times they can think is incredible.
Right.
And it's like a bank account. That's the way I describe trust as a bank account. Every interaction you have with a person is either a deposit or a withdrawal.
Right.
If you hit bankrupt, though, in the trust bank account, I actually don't know if it's recoverable. Because I don't like absolutes, so I try to avoid terms like always and never. But for me in my personal life, anybody that I've ever hit zero with, I have yet to this point been able to recover any level of trust in them, and no relationship can be built off that.
You know anything about game theory?
How in the fuck would I know anything about
There's
game
just
theory?
been a lot.
Do you have any idea who you're talking to? Michael, you actually might. Michael's a level 7 Dungeons & Dragons pitmaster, or whatever the fuck they call it.
That is impressive.
What's your gamer name? Michael, what's your gamer name?
I don't really have
It's D'Artagnan.
He looks like a wizard.
D'Artagnan. I just looked it up, though.
Game theory? No. What do you got?
So in game theory, there are all these different...
Oh, Jesus, it's got a graph.
Listen, I know nothing about this other than at the end of the day, the best game theory success rate comes from what's called there's some other versions of this that come along later, but forgiving tit for tat was one of the most successful. Forgiving. Yeah. So basically there you have like, I do something, you do something, I screw you over. And in game theory, it's like, okay, you screwed me over. I'm never trusting that guy again, so I'm not going to do a deal with this guy again. Mm-hmm. But in game theory, if you were to forgive me once, your level of success is higher. So you win more games. I don't know why. I'm not an academic. I never took game theory courses.
You brought this shit up.
I read about it. I read things. But doesn't make me an expert.
I've got nothing out of what you just brought up about game theory.
The point is that sometimes you should forgive people.
I'm not talking about not forgiving people. I'm talking about trusting people.
Well, also, sometimes you should be willing to trust someone again, even after they didn't do things right.
I can do that up to a degree with somebody.
Me too.
Repetitive behavior.
They can't repeat it.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If it happens before the bank account hits zero, I think you have nothing but opportunity to forgive.
Right.
But if it becomes zero or repeated behavior that takes micro withdrawals or a couple macro withdrawals and you hit zero, I think there is a point in time where you have to depart from that and move on to somebody who's not going to fuck you over.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah, I think on the way down, I don't think it goes from 100 to 0 overnight unless, your wife is out there just fucking, laying pipe with fucking,
right. Fire department,
LA Lakers, whatever analogy you want to go with.
Yeah.
Like you catch somebody doing that, that's like 100 to a 0 right there. I'm not saying it can't be recovered. I think you have a very long road to hoe if that happens. But yeah, I mean, I'm not a fucking perfect person. Trust me.
Right.
I need people to forgive me for my idiocy from time to time, but I try not to make it macro. I'd rather have that be a micro, which I can recover from. And it's all about, for me, thinking of the perspective of, don't let it hit 0. Get this sine wave moving back up in the other direction.
Yeah, I agree. I think, with in business, there's the difference between whether you're an owner or an employee. And I see this.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, so I see this a lot, right? Like, and it's like the guy who signs the front versus the back of the check. There's a big mentality difference, even if you're like kind of like the same rank as that person in the business.
You can't expect somebody who's not an owner to care as much about the business as you do, period.
Right. Absolutely not. But at the end of the day, like, in what I found is like if I have more than one experience, it almost like negative, it almost always goes to zero, right? Because there's something there that is causing that person to kind of go off the rails, and I could spend all my time trying to fix it, but I'm not in the business of fixing people. I'm in the business of building businesses, right? So that's the thing that's like can be a little bit tough sometimes. And then, once you've lost trust, it's kind of over, but you're constantly trying to build trust as a leader in a business. So it's that duality where it's like constantly cutting both ways. So trusting people too much has been the biggest mistake I've made. At the same time, building trust with people has basically built success, because I trusted people to do things, and sometimes they went off and totally fucked up, and sometimes they went off and did everything perfectly. And so being able to let people do that worked.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. And I think in the end, you're just highlighting the value of trust. It can be your greatest asset and ally, or it can be what destroys you if you lose it all. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs? Especially, let's narrow it down to people coming out of the military who want to become an entrepreneur. What would you advise them?
I would do it sooner rather than later. They usually come up with 100 reasons why they need to wait. What I usually tell guys is give yourself 2 years to get your footing, figure out what you really want to do. The idea that you have in your head when you come out of the military is probably not what is going to be the thing that you want to do later. So give yourself a little bit of like time to transition into a civilian life. The second thing is you might want to try more than one thing. So I had a SEAL officer call me one time, and he was just graduating from Wharton, and he's like, hey, I've got these 2 ideas, and I didn't really know him. But he called up and he's like, hey, I got these 2 ideas. One is X and one is Y. Everybody's telling me to do X. I feel like I should do Y. What do you think I should do? And I was like, you should do both. And he's like, you're the first person who said that. And I was like, both of those businesses have completely different energy cycles of your time and talent and the way they're going to go to market. The sales process on one of them is, totally different than the sales process on another. You can fill in, you're a team guy. You can fill in all these gaps of all your time working on both these things and make them both successful. And he did.
It's interesting that all the response he got from industry was so binary.
Yeah. Because it's going back to that
it's just
focus
A or
thing.
B. It's like there's always a C or a D
Right.
or an E or an F.
Right. And that's the thing is like, I feel like, business school hammers into these, most people, you need to be focused. And a lot of entrepreneurs will tell me, very successful guys, like, you need to be more focused. And I'm like, well, excuse me, but don't you own like 5 businesses? And they're like, well, that doesn't count, because of this, that, and other thing. I'm like, okay, well, when did you start them? And if you go through the chronology and the cadence of how they started those businesses, they were running a mile a minute. Like they were doing everything all at once when they shouldn't have, and it worked. Right. And so after kind of being a student of entrepreneurship for 25 years now, I basically learned that like your best entrepreneurs are keeping themselves occupied with the kind of like the hobby, if you will, of business. They love what they're doing and what they're doing every day, and they're doing a lot of it, as opposed to, oh, that's what I do. But I love, fishing more than anything, right? Or, coaching Little League or whatever it is. Like when other guys were coaching Little League, I was starting Killcliff. That was like my thing. Not that there's anything wrong with coaching Little League, but that's a huge time commitment, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, my hobby is like when I get done with work, I work on this other work that I really enjoy and want to be successful at. So I think that there's a way to make it work. There's always a path forward. I mean, so I on the walk over, I was telling you about how I almost died when a tree fell on my house. I'd never had a near-death experience in my whole life. And then one night, a tree, it was December 27th, 2012 at 4 a.m. And a tree, it was a 90,000-pound, 90-year-old poplar tree, fell on my house and came crashing down above my bed. And the trunk of the tree was over me, and then this big branch almost hit my wife and took her down into the basement, and it crushed our house, crushed the foundation in the basement. I mean, we had to like total the house, everything, and somehow, you know, we walked out. Like my buddy was like, "It's just not your day to die," right? Like, and the tree came to rest over my body. Probably the distance between this table and the floor, like I was laying in there. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So it just stopped, and one branch went into the front yard, and one in the basement, and so anyway, at this time, I'm the CEO of Killcliff. My lending company I mentioned earlier, I was starting that. I had 23. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah. I had like a 15-month-old and a 3-month-old. No, sorry, a 23-month-old and a 3-month-old, and then, you know, and no real income, because I was like running 2 startups, right? And so, and I didn't like, you know, go, oh my God, woe is me. I just was like, okay, that put like a couple things happened all at once, right? I had to like, A, not take any day for granted. B, I was like, okay, I have to prioritize shit like I've never prioritized things in my life, because I can't do things in the wrong order right now. I've got 2 companies and I think at the time maybe we had, you know, between the 2, maybe there was like 30 employees or something like that. I was like, okay, if everybody has a spouse and they have 1 kid on average, you know, there's like 90 people, you know, that I'm kind of responsible for right now. And so I gotta work. So anyway, in both of those companies, Killcliff and the other company, were both Inc. 500, number 100, or, you know, both Inc. 500 companies in the space of 4 years. One, Killcliff, was 102 and the other one was 121. And so, like, that all happened while we were homeless. We had 2 little babies, had a third one in the process. And so there's like, when people are like, I don't have time to do that. Bullshit. Like, there's always time. Like, there's always time. You're just wasting it on things that, you know, could be, you know, you could be using it for the things you're saying you don't have time for. Now, it's a choice people make, and people are pretty intellectually dishonest with themselves about what they spend their time doing and
for sure,
what they invest in, right? So at the end of the day, like, and I didn't even realize it was happening. I was just like, I went into action, right? Like, I guess, you know, near-death experience will kind of do things like that. And now I look back on it, and I'm like, if I could get through that and get through buds and get through everything, like, there's nothing, you know, there's like, I'm not getting shot at, right? This is like, all I'm doing is wasting opportunity if I'm not working at this stuff every day, day in, day out. Now, I also have to invest in my family and all that stuff. Yeah. So there's that piece of it now. But, you know, I just can't wrap my head around people who are like, I just don't have time for that. I'm like, whatever. And, you know, it's a cop out.
Yeah, it falls apart too when you ask people to kind of list out how they spend their time in their day.
Right.
It's a rough optic.
I wonder what they do.
I'd say it depends on the person.
I really wonder. I bet if you could take because now that you can track like how much Netflix gets watched and Prime Video and all that stuff, you could probably figure out that there's people consuming a lot of content.
Yeah. I mean, even just the screen time on your phone.
Right.
It's pretty fucking jarring.
Yeah. I spend too much time on my phone.
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody does. It's a blessing and a curse. I mean, you can literally access unfettered information, and what you do with it, though, is a totally different thing.
Right.
So you think you can do it with Killcliff? What do you put your odds at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100%.
No way. You're like 80-20.
No, I mean...
80% fucked, for clarity. 20% maybe.
You know, it's one of those things, like the story of the founder getting kicked out, you know, coming back, taking over the business, running into a host of challenges in that process, and then kind of turning it around. Like, it's just the way the story goes, right? And at the end of the day, there's a very clear path. Again, finding a path to make it work. People are supporting the business like they've never supported before. Not only the customer base, but, you know, people from, you know, the old days, like, you know, guys like you and other folks who kind of drifted away, right? They've kind of come back, and it's an amazing feeling, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited about, like, you know, the original investors who like thought they lost all their money on it. I'm excited about them getting their money back. Yeah. You know, so it's like one of those things. Like, I'm incredibly motivated to make it work, and you know, we'll see. I mean, sure, there's always a risk it doesn't work, but I'm going to give it 100%.
What's the biggest obstacle you guys are facing right now?
It's really kind of getting things running right again. So basically, from production, so right now we're out of stock in like 2/3 to 75% of our products because demand is so high, and that's great. That's a great problem to have, and I want that.
Not over the long term.
Yeah, but we've been out of stock way too much lately.
Yeah.
And so like getting the line time and everything like that. So that takes, again, the cash hole, has to be filled properly in order to make it work. And so that's the biggest challenge right now is just kind of getting things synced up to work properly.
What are you most excited about?
Well, I think, when I look at it, I'm like, okay, this is a super, like this about Killcliff, you mean? Or
in general?
Oh,
start with Killcliff and then just outside of Killcliff as well.
So, with Killcliff, I'm excited for the brand. Like this is a brand that's got legs, right? And it's working, and I'm excited for, kind of the community behind it and everything else. And I think it's going to work. One thing that Joe brings to the equation that I didn't realize before is that his audience is so broad. It brings all these new people into the conversation that just weren't there before. We were like in an echo chamber before.
Tens of millions of people per episode consume his content.
Yeah.
It is unfucking believable how powerful he is.
Yeah. And so that's exciting. I'm also excited about the human performance angle, which we'll get into, or which we'll get to eventually. And then, just in general, like, I mean, this is going to sound super corny because it's like one of the things today, but like, in software, like I love AI. I love applied AI. So basically that means you've got a software product that does job A, and now you apply AI to it, and you can do that job like 10 times faster or 100 times faster because you don't need the same amount of labor to do it. It can learn and do things for you. That's a game changer. In the business I'm in most of my time, but it's also a game changer, I think, for a lot of people, right? So like in the past, growing a business has always been tough because of the people that you can hire and everything else. That's going to change. The shift is going to go back to the entrepreneur and their ability to use tools that exist and put them together in different ways. Do you know who Clayton Christensen is? He was a Harvard Business School guy. He wrote the Innovator's the Innovator's Dilemma, and so
you and I read very different things.
Yeah, I read So, did you ever read Empire of the Summer Moon?
Yeah.
We read the same things.
That is a singular example of all that you have brought up today, of which I can get behind.
Did you read Army at Dawn?
No.
Yeah, you should read it. It's good. So anyway,
okay.
I thought I threw it out there as a chance. I was like, there's like a 5% chance, but anyway,
way lower than that.
So, but the point is, like, I think that these things, like, entrepreneurs are going to find ways to stack tools together to have success at things that would have taken a lot of people and capital before.
It's already happening.
Yeah, it's happening so fast.
And I say that just based off of like peripherally looking through YouTube, and it's all. Well, it's not all. I guess my feed would be slightly curated depending on what I'm looking for. The volume of how do you use this AI platform to fill in your business plan, your marketing plan, like graphical design, website design, code, like it's fucking powerful.
It's amazing. And I think it's going to help a lot of people do a lot better in life, right? Because now, like, you don't get held hostage by the graphic design guy or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not that they're hostage takers, but like, you know what I mean? Like you can't afford him.
Well, you're not beholden to another person and their work schedule or their work effort.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to have a really interesting way of cascading through business. So I'm excited about that. Real excited about it. In fact, I'm very focused on that right now.
Give me the elevator pitch for why people should try Killcliff.
Oh, that's good. Well, I mean, listen, it's a great product. It's a clean product and it tastes delicious. But at the end of the day, there's people spend a lot of money on beverages, this is a beverage that at the end of the day tries to have an actual impact on you physically, mentally, from a performance perspective. And at the same time, it's a way for people to participate in giving back to the SEAL community, right? Like that's my goal was like all these people kept coming up to me like, what can I do to help the SEALs? And I'm like, I don't like call the SEAL Foundation, like go to their website, and that goes to a certain, but they want to they want to own a piece of it, right? They want to buy it, they want to consume it, they want part of that lifestyle, right? And I think that's the thing. In the beginning, it was like we didn't talk about ourselves, we didn't do anything. It was like, hey, did you try this stuff? It's pretty good, So it was like we were enigmatic on purpose, but. That's not the best elevator pitch.
I was going to say, we're definitely in a skyscraper. You lost your train of thought some way up there. People have gotten on and off the elevator. You need to work on that.
Yeah, I probably do. I'm probably not the best sales guy.
I used to call it a Twitter pitch, but then the fucker added like 500 characters, so you could have done what you just did, but written word.
Yeah.
If you can encapsulate it in like 20 seconds, it's a powerful message.
Yeah.
There's a way to do that with Killcliff for sure.
I'm going to use AI to help me.
I would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
Just joking.
Where can people find more about the brand?
Killcliff.com.
Okay. All right. I'm going to let you close it out. We've been on for over 2 hours.
Oh, we have? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I
what do you want people to know? What have we not talked about that you want to talk about? I'm trying to avoid you getting dick slapped by your wife for taking too long.
My family?
Yeah. Just a little cock shot as you walk by. Like, you don't need that today. Nobody needs that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, by the way, little quick story. We're driving down the road.
Is it like an elevator pitch story that goes on for hours?
I'm sorry, but it says something about my wife. And so we're like, when I came up with the idea for the brand, we're like driving down the road in Mississippi. She's from Mississippi, and we pull off the paved road to get on a dirt road to go to her friend's house where we're staying, and they live on a farm. And I stopped the car and I was like, Marcy, I got to tell you something. I'm going to take basically most of the money I have, and we're engaged at this time, and invested in this thing called Killcliff, and she knew what it was, and she's like, I believe you will be successful with it. And like that little bit of, support was like all that I needed. But one thing I would say, dude, is like, and I'm not trying to sound corny, but like I've been, like what you've done is so cool.
I haven't done anything.
No, you've done a lot of stuff. It's cool. You got a podcast. Like, it's really good.
There's 1,000 podcasts a day that are created.
That's too many.
It's what it develops is a world where there's more content that you could actually consume.
But people consume yours.
Some people do.
Did you always?
Some people don't.
Did your voice change?
No.
It's like more like you got a good voice for this.
That's gay.
I know.
I don't know where you're going with that. My voice is exactly the same.
I'm not going anywhere.
All right.
I'm not going anywhere.
I mean, how am I supposed to respond to that? You have a face for radio, Todd. Like what?
Oh, dude. I think it's awesome, man. I think you've done incredible. It's cool.
If I was looking at the light at the end of the tunnel, getting out of the military, even in the years after, like doing the skydiving stuff, if you would have had me put 100 things down on a piece of paper that I thought I would be doing them, this isn't one of them.
Right.
And it's so much fun to sit down across from people and just talk to people about things that they think is interesting. Like the coffee shop is my first, well, I don't know if I could say, I guess it would depend on what people consider to be an entrepreneurial endeavor. Some people would say, well, your podcast is. They could be correct. Brick and mortar, something that's like physically tangible that I'd try to be there every day because we built something where I love hanging out.
Right.
Man, challenges from a managerial perspective. All of it, infrastructure, cost. Oh man, pro forma budgets, all sorts. I'm like, pro forma? Does that mean like some dude's got some professional form? Like, what are we talking about? Like, And what a learning experience. But I never thought that having a podcast would be part of that. And it's awesome, man.
I think it's a great podcast. I'm not just saying that. Like I've listened to a bunch of episodes, and like they're all stellar, and you're a great interviewer, and I get a lot of really meaningful information out of it too. So it's cool.
Well, I guess you probably just sending the checks to the wrong address.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, I mean, I noticed Black Rifle Coffee is a sponsor. I mean, yeah, we should probably talk about that. Well,
I'm going to go with like brands that are established, not these fucking iffy
fly by night
shit can the CEO. Like, you guys got a little bit of a rough history we got to work our way through.
We do. Yeah. And are you skydiving still?
Skydiving, yes. Base jumping, no. I don't have the time for currency when it. That is a world I enjoyed it so much, but that's not like, hey, I have a few toes in that world, and I'm
Yeah.
That's like you have got to be current. You have to be up on like understanding where you can go, your own limitations, whether like there's just it's like
Right.
the reward that I personally got from that does not outweigh the risk.
Right.
Skydiving I've been doing for 20 plus years at this point. Literally can do it with my eyes closed. The risk to reward ratio is way different.
Yep.
So that's an easy one.
I had a dream the other day that I was skydiving, and I didn't know if it was a military or civilian shoot.
Yeah. How'd that go work out for you?
It turned out it was civilian.
Okay.
Yeah, it worked out.
Okay.
But
there's only two places you really need to look.
Yeah.
You know, it's either it's just like right here or down on the bottom.
right.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I don't know why it scared me in my dream.
you don't need a parachute to skydive
Okay.
unless you want to do it twice.
There you go.
What do you want to leave people with? What do you want to close out with? For the love of God, don't do another elevator pitch.
I won't.
Yeah.
No, I mean, listen, I'm grateful to be here. Thank you very much.
What do you guys got planned for your rest of your Montana journey? Let's talk about that.
We're going to dinner tonight and then taking the 5:30 flight out tomorrow.
Where are you going to dinner tonight?
I don't know. It's an Italian place in Whitefish.
Oh, poor choice. Yeah. For any of you listening, visiting Kalispell, Michael, chime in. I would go the Mercantile, probably the best steak in Kalispell.
Okay.
There is a place called the DeSoto Grill, which has got a bunch of cool, like, wild game, and that's got cornbread that will change your life.
I like that.
And then in Whitefish, I always recommend Jalisco's for Mexican food. Am I missing anything, Michael?
No, there's this tiny hole-in-the-wall Mexican place by Michael's. I'm forgetting the name, though, but it's really, really good.
By Michael's?
Gas station.
No, fuck you. No, I've heard of this place. If you eat Mexican food out of a gas station, you deserve what happens.
It's not in a
Fuck
gas
you.
station. It's by
I
a
know
gas
where it
station.
is. There is a door that connects the two, and I've watched them walk back and forth. If you get Montezuma's Revenge and just fucking hanging drywall in the toilet, that's your fault if you eat at a gas station Mexican food place.
Unless you're a wizard. Have you been to that place?
Wizard?
I must be a wizard.
You're like really crossing metaphors here. What does the fucking wizard have to do with it?
He's the wizard.
He's not.
Okay. I thought in D&D.
I am a wizard.
In Dungeons and
Oh,
Dragons.
D'Artagnan?
Yeah.
You have to refer to him by that name so he can assume that persona. If you don't,
There's
he
a
won't.
place in Big Fort called Oro y Plata.
Oro y Plata.
Have you been there?
No.
I've heard of that.
It's really good.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, I would go there every day if I could.
All right.
Just
You live your best life, sir.
thank you.
Awesome.